Hey everyone, welcome back to the Kicks and Picks podcast. Coach Steve here with you, along with Scotty. Scotty's back from vacation, and we get one back and we lose one. Nick is back away on work, from what we're told, not on a bender in Vegas. Since he was the only one, Scotty, that brought the record down last week. Let it be known, we had a very good week, 7-3. What did I say? The units were we were up. Change the tab here. 3.91 units up on a 7-3 weeks.
We'll call that four units.
Yeah, just about 4 units. Nick had two of those losses, so
He did.
not to bury him while he's not here, but maybe that he's in hiding. He says his name for himself, or his what he's calling it, is a perpetual 1-2 streak right now. Every week is 1-2 for him.
Yeah, I was in a similar funk to start the season, but I kind of found a new little niche for me with these like parlays that I've been doing. Just taking some of these like favored teams, parlaying together, getting around even money. I'm 2-0 on those. I think my aggregate score now is like 16-1. So unfortunately, I didn't find any clubs this week. So no, maybe a little bit of a spoiler, but nothing coming this week on a parlay. But hopefully, I found some other value that'll work for this weekend.
Yeah, and the Podlock back. 5 wins, 2 losses, and 7. Pretty darn good for our Podlock, up just over 2 units. So we're happy with that. Always good to be on the plus side of things there. I feel pretty good about myself after last week. I went 3-0. I hit that big Leverkusen team total at plus 170. It felt really good. When you have that like hunch and you ride with it, and then it comes out when you're in those bigger plus numbers like you did a couple weeks ago, it definitely feels good, and it helps boost our total. So we're back over into plus money, just under a
Yeah.
unit. It's not the greatest, but it's definitely better than being down like we were the last 2 weeks overall. So we'll take
You
it.
and the Podlock are carrying it right now because you and the Podlock combined are around plus 5.5 units, and then Nick and I are right around -5. Nick is actually closing in on me. I started off the season, I think I was deep in the red,
Yes.
climbing my way up a little bit, and Nick, like you said, with his perpetual 1-2 streak, it has found his way down to my level, unfortunately. So this might be the week that I pass him. Maybe this is the week where Nick takes over the bottom spot in the capper table for Kicks Picks podcast.
Yeah, for sure. And we're going to hope to keep things hot on the weekend because, I mean, we could just touch on it quick. The Champions League match day 2 is passed, and we put a bunch of picks out there. Maybe too many, I guess, on Tuesday. But even with, if we had kept a few off the bed sheet, it was a rough day. Today was a little bit better, just around even. But Champions League's been hard to cap so far, from what I've noticed in 2 match days.
Yeah, it's been a lot of upsets, a lot of games where we expect few goals suddenly become goal fests, and vice versa. I mean, if you told me today that between Dortmund and Milan and Atletico Feyenoord, one game was going to have 5 goals and one game was going to have 0, I don't think you and I ever would have guessed that the Milan Dortmund game would have been the one with
Yeah.
0 goals.
Definitely not. I,
So
I was expecting at least a couple goals in that one. We put the over 2.5 out there. I expected at least two. Maybe a 1-1 or something.
yeah,
Very very strange to see that go scoreless, 0-0. Milan disappointing so far. It's back-to-back 0-0s in the Champions League. We had them as the team that could win that group, but they're not taking advantage of opportunities that are presented to them, which is disappointing. Um, I know that was the one future that I played that I thought was worthwhile in terms of, like, I think it was plus 500 or something.
yeah.
And it's still open because Newcastle beat PSG, so those teams are both on 3 points at this point, and Milan's on 2, so the chances are there for them. But man, could have easily been on 6 points with the amount of chances they've had. So certainly something to keep an eye on because it's been very different in Serie A for them as we track that league. So yeah, I mean, City had a tough time. PSG went to St. James Park and
Ugh,
really got it handed to
horrible.
them. Yeah.
They tried playing a
Um,
4-2-4 formation, which was, I mean, they tried to set up as a 4-2-3-1, but when you have Ramos, Kolomuani, and Mbappe all playing up top, like it becomes a 4-2-4. And their midfield was, I put it in our group chat, it was like non-existent. They have this talented 17-year-old kid that was trying to do what he could, and then Manuel Ugarte, who coming over from Lisbon, I think, trying to like anchor it, but Newcastle just overran them in the midfield nonstop, and I'm surprised it took them as long as it did to actually make changes. Because for me, like after that second goal, like I would have brought on a third midfielder right away. Kolumwani wasn't really even doing much anyways, so it wouldn't have been a loss to take him off.
Yeah, a couple other things that jumped out. Obviously, Manchester United really in deep trouble now after that 3-2 loss to Galatasaray. We had Galatasaray plus a goal and a half, thinking they'll at
Yeah.
least keep it close, and that was our rationale for the pick. If anybody saw our write up, it was we're not necessarily saying that Galatasaray will win or that Manchester United won't win, but we think they're good enough to keep it close, and there they are getting a 3-2 win at Old Trafford. That's a big one.
Yeah, first
Arsenal,
first win for them in England in 17 years or something like that.
wow. Arsenal went to France and lost to Lens, who apparently, according to Ligue 1, are farmers. That's like a provincial
Yeah.
side, and there they are getting a 2-1 win over Arsenal at home. Famous win for them. That was definitely a surprise as well. Like you mentioned, the Atletico scoreline, they ended up coming back and beating Feyenoord because for a little bit it looked like Feyenoord was going to go to Madrid and get all 3 points, and that would have been something. Shakhtar, big comeback against Antwerp. I regret not betting them, draw no bet like I thought about, but hey, I mean, for a while I would have sweated it out.
Another 5 goal surprise. Like who would have thought
Yeah.
that game would have had 5 goals in them?
Barcelona 1-0 win over Porto, very low scoring. I guess not that surprising considering the way Porto sometimes plays, but Barca managed to kind of escape Portugal with the 1-0. The 1-0 is not always easy to get on the road. Those are some of the big ones, but I think Newcastle putting up 4 is big, and the big thing for them too. It comes if that group, because we called that the group of death early on, like goal differential could play a big part in that group, right? And if you put up 4 and you're +3 on PSG, even if you go to France and lose 2-1 or something, you still have that nice little cushion there in terms of goal differential. If they can go and get some other results, they were 0-0 against Milan. I think they're going to feel really good at home against both Milan and Dortmund if they're in this kind of form.
Yeah, and I think I know you probably didn't get to watch the game, coach, because you're at work, but the crowd was unbelievable. Like that, the second that I started watching that game, I think it was Anthony Gordon closed down a defender on PSG and cleared the ball out for a goal kick. Right, like it was just he ran him down. The defender tried to like make a pass up. Anthony Gordon just cleared it out, and he starts pumping up the crowd, and the crowd just roared. And I was like, oh, that's right. Like this is like a big return to the Champions League match for Newcastle, and the whole match they were just nonstop, screaming and chanting, and I realized I was like, oh yeah, no, I fucked up with this PSG pick because I didn't consider the fact that Newcastle was going to be in full voice for all 90 minutes because it definitely made a huge difference in the game.
Yeah,
I mean, the
and
fact
I
that
think that's
PSG played
yeah.
2 midfielders didn't help, but certainly the crowd was a key point too.
I think too, like you said, when you're out of the Champions League for 20 years or whatever it was, like that's just like a big moment for those fans, right? You've been waiting, some people almost their whole lifetime if you're someone in your late 20s or something, right? You haven't seen it since you were a
Yeah.
kid, and that's huge. The Real Madrid win too,
Yes.
I almost missed that one. That was big for them at Napoli. I don't know how that last goal got called an own goal. I don't know if it stayed an own goal, but that was some strike. Poor Alex Moret for getting an old goal pinned on him on that rocket. I forget who hit it. I don't know if it was Camavinga or who it was, but
Was it
um,
Valverde?
was it
I think it was
Valverde? Yeah,
Valverde.
somebody hit
Yeah.
it hard, and it was some goal, and they pinned it as an own goal. That's kind of criminal for him not to get credit for that, but big win for them. I thought Napoli would have had a little bit better showing at home. They were kind of in better form, and I know that was one of the ones we were having trouble handicapping. You were leaning Madrid, Nick and I were leaning Napoli, so we went Napoli in our picks. Um, but we said this could be a 0-0, could be a 3-3, could be anywhere in between, and it ended up being a pretty exciting
Close
game
to
from what
three
I saw
three.
the scoreline. Yeah, pretty close to
Yeah.
that 3-3. So Champions League definitely something to keep an eye on in a few weeks' time, and seeing if this trend continues, some of these upsets, some of these unexpected score lines, and Newcastle's gonna be, I think, one of the teams I keep an eye on just because we've been following them since we started the pod almost just about 2 years ago now, getting close to it, and we've liked to see them do well, get their return to the Champions League, and I think even we were like, they did well in the Premier League last year, but Champions League's a different ball game. We'll see if the depth catches up to them. But right now they're topping the group and could get interesting. And I misspoke and said they had 3 points. They have 4. It's PSG on 3 because PSG's got the win and the loss. But definitely want to keep an eye on. I think that's going to be a fun group to watch the rest of the way.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, Other than that, I think that covers Champions League for now. So, Scotty, you weren't here to help us preview the game last week. Andy came on from Happy Hour Sports. He's another Liverpool supporter. I didn't get to watch the match, but I know there was a lot of controversy in that one. I mean, what do you take away from a match like that against Spurs where refereeing becomes such an issue? Two red cards. I mean, your boys held out until it was pretty close to like the 95th minute, right? It
It
was like
was.
pretty
It was
late.
the
Yeah.
last kick. Yeah, it was the last kick. It was an unfortunate own goal off of a cross your heart, hope to die cross in from I think it was uh, Pedro or whatever Perry. Um, but yeah, I mean it was a tough one to swallow because they played so well, considering all that was up. They were stacked up against. The first red card was pretty controversial because it was just one of those soccer movements where Curtis Jones goes to make the tackle, gets the ball, but at the same time, the opposing player kicks the ball, and so Curtis Jones' foot gets moved over the top of the ball and into the upper ankle. And the VAR decided to show a still shot of just Curtis Jones' studs going right into the ankle, as opposed to like the whole play,
Mm,
which apparently is not supposed to happen according to all of the Twitter sleuths online, reading the VAR rule books over what's allowed and what's not. But it just kind of sucks because it was really like a built up to be a huge match. And I think,
yeah.
we talked about, or you guys talked about, the dominance that Liverpool had in that fixture moving forward. And this is kind of like Tottenham's first chance to kind of, stand up and kind of take back some of their, reclaim some of their status in the Premier League. And yeah, they get the win here, but it doesn't, I don't think it's a feel good win for them. Although the players celebrated like it was. For Liverpool, I think the fans, feel cheated from, some of the decisions that went against them, but we're happy with like how the team performed overall. It just sucks that, we're 7 games into the season right now, and it's, it's tough to really figure out what Liverpool really is because they've had so many games where they've been playing down a man, down two mans. They've had, I think, 4 red cards in 7 matches when they've had 3 red cards in the last, 4 seasons combined. It's just tough. So you got to hope at some point it turns around. With the way that Klopp talks, I think there's a lot of like tinfoil hat conspiracies out there about why this is happening. I certainly think the way that Klopp, speaks in the media about these refs and the decisions and, how he handles them on the sideline does not help the cause at all. So
Mm.
I don't really know what to do in that regard. Like you just have to support the manager, but at the same time, like I would be lying if I said I didn't cringe a little bit every time he starts to kind of take the piss out of the refs because you just know it's going to come back to bite him in the next one.
I can
Um,
relate to that
yeah,
with what's
yeah,
going on in
exactly.
Rome the
Like,
past 2 years.
yeah. So I don't know. If it's feel good for Liverpool in some regard because I genuinely I said it on Twitter kind of like tongue in cheek and out of frustration, but I think Liverpool might be like the best team in the Premier League this season now. Man City dropped points. We'll talk about them a little bit, but they dropped points to Wolves. They're dealing without KDB. They're dealing right now with Rodri on a suspension. Um, I think Liverpool have every bit of talent and depth right now to challenge this City team. And I think City is like one injury away from really kind of coming back down to earth, depending on who it is. Whereas with Liverpool, they've been getting healthier and healthier, and I think they can sustain some injuries because like I said, they've been playing down a man. They've been playing with guys who've been
Yeah.
suspended. I think they can kind of deal with it. Plus, they're playing in Europa, so they can rotate a little bit easier than City can. So I think at this point at this junction in the season, we have one match to go until another international break. I genuinely think the top 2 teams right now are City and Liverpool. I think Tottenham, based off of that match, they're going to probably hit a decline at some point in this season. Their defense is not good. They really struggle to score against a 9-man Liverpool team. They really struggle to score, which was surprising because they had that streak of, and they still have it going, of 2+ goals scored in every game so far in the Premier League this season. But this time they really relied on a by chance deflection to get that second goal in the 96th minute. So I think there's going to be a period where Tottenham struggle. I think they'll probably come back down to earth. Will they finish in the top 4, top 5? I think it's probably favorable right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if Newcastle kind of hits their vein of form if they make up some points. Arsenal are going to kind of kick it into gear at some point this season. They've been scraping along, but if those things all happen, then Tottenham could find themselves on the outs once again.
Yeah, I think the big thing for Spurs is they don't play the midweek matches this season. I think that in the long run could help them, especially if other teams start to struggle with injuries and depth issues, like if Newcastle picks up a couple injuries or Brighton or anybody really. But I think all the teams you just mentioned are helped by the decline of United and the fact that Chelsea can't rebound. Last weekend Crystal Palace went to Old Trafford and won. So this is two matches in the week that United lost at home at Old Trafford. When I first started watching European football about a decade and a half ago was the year that, around the time Roma had to go to Old Trafford and got absolutely mauled in the Champions League. And like that wasn't a place you wanted to go if you were an opposing side. And now it's like, Galatasaray goes and wins with 3 goals, not like they squeak out a 1-0 win or something. Crystal Palace goes there. So that's something interesting. I mean, Chelsea got a win against Fulham. So maybe they'll start to find a little form because they don't have those midweek matches too, but they've dug themselves a little bit of a hole. How that match stayed under 2.5 for me to hit my last lock of the week was a miracle because they scored 2. I think it was around like the 17th and the 19th minute or something. Yeah. The other shocker in besides City losing to Wolves, because you mentioned that one, that was surprising, but the real shocker to me was the fact Brighton gave up 6 to Villa. Villa has some of these matches where they just turn it on sometimes, and I guess Brighton is prone to a clunker here and there. I guess it happens, but yeah, wow, that was a shocker to open the weekend. That was your only loss of the weekend.
Yes, to say you and me both, Coach, because I think I had Brighton draw no bet in that one, thinking that was as safe of a pick as I'd get all weekend, and nope. Ollie Watkins had something else to say about it. So,
and I was like, oh, he beat me to it. That would have been one of my picks if you hadn't gotten it in there before me last week. So. Surprise there for sure. Newcastle got the win. Arsenal got a win. So it's going to be a fun Premier League. It's definitely going to be tight, I think. I think there's going to be a lot of ups and downs for some of these teams. That City doesn't look as invincible, like you said, as they've been. It's going to be interesting. Quick touch on Serie A, and then we'll get into the preview of the 2 big matches for the weekend back in the Premier League. So Serie A, you've had a lot to turn into a real bummer 0-0 match. Bit surprising there. Inter, the big story was Lautaro Martinez scored 4 goals in, I think, 30 minutes off the bench. That was a big one. Knicks boys, another loss. This one to Milan 2-0. Napoli, like we said, came back with 4 goals against Lecce. So they're starting to find their form. Roma finally got a win against Frosinone. So teams that were supposed to win for the most part won. We'll see what happens, because if you look at the standings, you still see teams like Roma in 13th, Lazio in 16th, and we're heading into the 8th match of the season, not where you expect to find those kind of clubs. And it's kind of starting to look like it's almost, I don't want to say a 2-team race yet at the top with Inter and Milan, because Napoli and Juve are only 4 back. They're not that far off, but it's starting to feel like a 2-team race between Inter and Milan, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like Juve can probably get there out of the other clubs, but I don't know. To me, Milan, they're treading on thin ice right now, because they waste so many opportunities. Like, they're so good at creating chances, but so bad at like finishing. And that's one of those things where it's like, I think we saw it in Champions League with Inter. Like, I think they had 21 shots on target, and they had 1 goal out of it. Not 21 shots on target, 21 shots in general, but they only had 1 goal. And like, I feel like Milan is bound to have a game like that as well, where it kind of, bites them. Luckily, their defense has been pretty good. I think that was something that Martino called out before, where he was kind of concerned with some of the pieces they lost on their back line, but the defense has been holding out so far. So I don't know. I'm not as much of a Napoli believer. That's hence why I went with Real Madrid midweek this week with Champions League. But I think, if somebody's gonna be challenging the clubs from Milan, it's gonna be Juve.
And I think part of that too, just like Spurs, they don't play those midweek matches this season, and I think that'll be a big advantage for them as the season wears on and you start to play, especially because Inter, for sure, most likely will advance out of their Champions League group. Milan's having a little bit tougher time, but there's a good chance they could get out as well. And if those teams start to get into the knockout rounds deep like last season, that's where the depth starts to get worn down a bit, and where Juve can take advantage of that. I agree. Napoli, I think they'll hang around, and they're probably favorite for top four right now, along with those other three sides. But Rudy Garcia, I think, is, we've talked about it, a downgrade from Spalletti. And we'll see. We'll see how the defense holds up without Kim through a full season. A couple more big head-to-heads, because we did see when they played Lazio, that was their one loss. They took care of business, Lazio, against them, and Lazio has not been good this season, so they can still be vulnerable at the back. We'll see if they are rounding into form maybe after these couple wins. We'll see how much the Madrid loss affects them on the weekend, if it affects them at all. But they're not going to have it so easy like last season in terms of defending the title, when they kind of ran away with it, I think.
Yeah.
And just to touch on games to keep an eye on this weekend. So the big ones in Italy, the Juve Torino in Turin, we have the Derby della Mole. Lazio Atalanta is a big one heading into the international break, and Napoli Fiorentina is another big one. I wish Nick was here to talk about his boys Lazio. He would just say they're trash. They're not going to win. It's, bet Atalanta to the house. He does have a pick in his locks for us later. But him, he was skeptical about them heading to Celtic today, and they did end up getting a late winner. So I don't know if he's feeling any better, but
I'll answer that. No, there's no way he's feeling better about that.
Nah.
No chance.
No. We'll see. Hopefully it produces more goals than the Juve Atalanta match, because that was not good. I think they said Juve's lowest XG under Allegri, and they've had some pretty low XGs in his tenure, I'm sure. So Napoli Fiorentina could be a fun one, I think, on Sunday, the late match. That could be good. If Fiorentina's truly going to challenge for a top four spot, that could be where they have to, if they could go get a result in Naples, maybe they could prove that they're going to hang around this year, because they're also on 14 points. But after a Thursday match, that might be tough. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on those matches. But we're going to focus on the Premier League, Scott, with our previews. First, I just want to touch quickly on Liverpool Brighton, because we'd be remiss to kind of just gloss over it completely. What do you expect in that one? Is that like a match where we're going to see a lot of goals? I think the over set at 3.5, what I saw earlier. It feels like a match that should see goals.
Yeah, it should be a high offense type game. Liverpool are going to be dealing with some suspensions from the Tottenham game fallout, so there'll be no Jota, there'll be no Curtis Jones. I think those are probably all good and well. I think Gakpo probably misses out with injury because he hurt his knee hamstring at some point when he scored his goal. So you'll see a front line of Nunez, Salah, and Diaz. Nunez has been dealing with an injury. I think he should be fine for this one. I know they had to rest him, but we'll see what the lineup looks like tomorrow for Europa League. But I expect that to be the top line. Midfield, I'm guessing you'll see either Ryan Gravenberch come in, who's been awesome when he's been playing. Maybe Endo comes in and lets McAllister get forward a little bit more. But not really any huge significant loss there in terms of quality. Not to say that Curtis Jones has been playing well this season, because he has, but luckily Liverpool actually have depth at midfield this year. So I expect those guys to be playing, and then obviously in the Brighton you'll have the usuals. You'll have Matoma, you'll have Solly Marsh playing, Evan Ferguson, all guys capable of scoring and creating chances. So fully expect that one to be a goal fest. I'm hoping Liverpool kind of come out angry, feeling a little bit slighted from their previous weekend match, and can hopefully get a result there and get back on track, especially with the key match that we're about to preview coming up. Someone's going to be losing points out of Arsenal and Man City, so got to take advantage of that when you have those kind of opportunities.
Yeah, so this one is at the Amex. Brighton is plus 205 at home on the money line. Liverpool plus 115 as the road team. Draw no bet on Brighton is plus 120. If you like Brighton and you think they can add, get the win at home and maybe want to protect yourself against a draw, plus 120 is a pretty good number. Liverpool minus 155, not as bettable. The over is set at 3.5 at minus 115 for the yes. No is minus 110. Brighton team total over 1.5 is minus 120. Interesting number there if you think Brighton could get 2 goals. Liverpool's is much higher at minus 185, so you can't really play that one. Couple other things that jumped out at me. Both teams to score is minus 320. That speaks to the fact that they expect
easy
both teams to score there. I was going to ask you this one, Scotty. First goal. We know Liverpool's prone to giving up the first goal in probably about the last season or so.
Oh yeah,
Brighton plus 105, Liverpool minus 145. Is that something that's maybe worth taking a shot on Brighton at plus 105?
for sure. Because even Liverpool's mo this season has been, their second half club. They usually struggle in the first half, sometimes find themselves down 1-0, and then they come out strong in the second half. So it's absolutely worth a shot. Especially at that number. I found there was a certain point last season where the books caught on, and it was, you know, basically like a minus 120, minus 120 type deal, depending on who your book was. And so I kind of got off it from there. But if Brighton are going to be plus money, even if it's what would you say, plus 105, I think
Plus
it's worth a
105 right
shot.
now. Yeah. And like you mentioned, if they're a second half team and you think Brighton might head into the break at in the lead, Brighton's plus 235 first half. Something interesting if you're a believer of Brighton getting off to a quick start in this one. Um, yeah, those are the ones that jumped out. Was definitely the Brighton team total. I think the over 3.5 is certainly in play at minus 115. I don't think that's a bad bet. I
Yeah.
think 4 goals is well within the realm of possibility here.
Even take a look at some team totals. Depending on who you think is going to come out the strongest, over 1.5, it's probably going to be like minus 160 or something, minus 170. But those are definitely numbers worth looking at as well.
Well, the Brighton one was minus 120. So
Okay.
that's one where if you think you're going to get a 2-2, 3-2
Yeah.
type match one way or another, minus 120 is a pretty good number on Brighton.
Yeah. For sure. I think that's definitely worth taking a shot at.
All right, so let's move on to the big one for this week. And you mentioned it. It is Arsenal and City. Last year, the two head-to-heads really determined the title when City took both. This time, City currently in first place at 18 points, just one above Arsenal after dropping the 3 against Wolves last weekend. Arsenal's unbeaten, but City picked up their first loss, like I mentioned. City haven't lost to Arsenal in regular time since the FA Cup semifinals during the COVID summer of 2020. Up before last season, that would have made a lot of sense, but then Arsenal got really good last season, and they still couldn't get it done even at home at the Emirates. They did beat them in this Community Shield via PKs to start the season, not in within the regular time, which is what the first stat is. That makes City 10-1-1 against Arsenal in regular time during that period. Scotty mentioned when we were talking about the teams earlier, Arsenal haven't really hit their stride. They did get a 4-0 win against Bournemouth last weekend, but they followed it up with that 2-1 loss to Lens in the midweek. They've been scraping out some 1-goal wins to keep pace, so they are only a point back, which is all that matters, I think, when you go into one of these head-to-heads. Gabby Jesus, healthy, got a chance to score a goal this weekend in the midweek to get that only goal in the loss. Will square off against his former club. Rodri will miss the match for City with that suspension from the red card he picked up against Forest recently. So those are all things to take into consideration. Rodri is a key piece of that midfield. And just to give you the odds before Scotty gives you his take, it's Arsenal plus 195 on the money line, City plus 145. This is at the Emirates to keep that in mind. So they are slight underdogs at home. Draws plus 225. Arsenal draw no bet plus 105. City minus 140 on the draw no bet. And the over is set at over 2.5 at minus 120. If you think it could somehow stay under, it's plus 130.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a really fun match to watch because I think it's going to be well played on both sides. I think, Arsenal, I think, are really hard to cap right now because we know what they're capable of. They just haven't been doing it yet. It might be one of those like title defense hangover type seasons for them where, they just were so drained from getting so close last season and then having it kind of fall apart in April that they haven't really hit the ground running. And it might take them a little bit to kind of shake that. But City, City are City. They're going to be the juggernaut that everyone has to try to keep pace with. Yes, I think they're a little bit more vulnerable this year with, KDB going to be out until probably the holiday period. The defense has been good, but I think there's every chance for them to be exposed like Wolves did this past weekend. In the midfield, they had this consistent midfield trio of De Bruyne, Rodri, and Gundogan. Gundogan is obviously now over at Barcelona. Just talked, KDB is going to be out for a bit. Rodri is now sitting out his second of 3 matches for suspension. And, if he picks up an injury, then they're really in a tough shape. So they're really relying on a lot of these other, tertiary pieces like Grealish, like Foden to kind of carry that load. So I think this one will certainly be a tightly contested affair. I don't expect any team to kind of come away with this with like a 3-goal win. Like I would be surprised if City win this 3-0, or even more surprised if Arsenal win this 3-0. Um, but I think you'll see good play on both sides at the very least.
Yeah, and the books have both teams to score at -170. Yes, so they're expecting both teams to score. Um, Both teams to score no draw. Yes, is +150. So if you think you're going to get a 2-1 winner somewhere, that's something that's a pretty solid number. It's not something I usually bet, but it's a bigger number than you get sometimes. Team totals too are pretty big in this one, Scotty. The over 1.5 for Arsenal is +145. The over 1.5 for City is +115. So both plus money.
Hammer that.
If
Hammer
Yeah,
that.
if you like someone
I
to
think
get 2 goals.
Yeah, I mean, again, City they're missing a lot, but they still have a lot. Like they still have Erling Haaland, who he's been pretty good this season. I mean, he's been great this season by his standards. He's been pretty good. I think he's kind of due for a big game. He usually kind of bangs in a hat trick like once a month, and I think it's been about a month since his last hat trick. So that's certainly on the horizon. I think the big X factor here is Doku. I had him in the props list as an anytime goal or
Mm-hmm.
assist +130 today against Leipzig, and he came through with both a goal and an assist in this just the second half. I mean, the guy he reminds me of a pacier, shiftier Wilfred Zaha, and I think he's only 21 right now, and I think he's gonna become a lot more polished under Pep than Zaha ever was, and he's gonna offer a real threat down the left side. So he's one to keep an eye on. I don't know if he's going to start. Pep's been kind of mixing and matching him coming off the bench, starting. Either way, I think he'll probably play about 45 to 60 minutes, depending on where he comes in. But he's certainly one to keep an eye on because he can really turn a game on its head. He's that dynamic and he's that dangerous. So curious to see what position Pep has him coming in on. And then there's Julian Alvarez, who I think he had an incredible goal. The goal that Doku assisted, he hit a nice curler into the top right corner today. So plenty of offensive firepower for City. Getting their team total over 1.5 at plus money is always good. I won't spoil my lock this week because I do have a pick in this match as one of my locks, but I think that a team total over 1.5, you can take both honestly, but certainly Cities I think is as good of a bet you'll get this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Alvarez. Like, how many Premier League clubs does he start on? Probably most of them, right?
Oh,
Besides
for
City.
sure. Yeah. Maybe
So like,
Liverpool. Maybe Liverpool, honestly, with the way that Nunez and Diaz and Salah have kind of fit in. But yeah.
yeah, it's like embarrassment of riches. Also something to keep in mind. I know Saka came off with a muscle injury yesterday for Arsenal. Martinelli's been out with a muscle injury as well. So those are a couple of key pieces on the attack, flanking Jesus that are missing. So certainly something to keep an eye on. I know they do have a little more depth there than they had, in years past. They have Trossard will probably start, right, and I don't know who's going to start on the other side. Who do you think starts on the other side? Do you think they play Havertz more wide, or do you think Nketiah gets like a look? He's more
I
of a
think it's
center
probably
forward, but
Havertz. For
yeah.
whatever reason, Arteta's been a huge fan of Havertz. I don't. I think the feedback from Arsenal fans has been kind of a mixed bag on how he's been performing. So, based off of that alone, my guess is it'll probably be Havertz to start with. And especially with Jesus coming off of injury, I think he'll probably want Nketiah to kind of be able to kind of spell him
Yeah.
at some point in the second half.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because you don't want to rely on Jesus to play all 90 if you don't have to.
Yeah.
And depending on how the fitness is there, that's a good point as well. And he played all 90 yesterday too, so who knows how much he's got in
Yep.
terms of minutes under his belt at this point. I think, yeah, Havertz played a little more withdrawn yesterday. I think he's got to move up in the formation and you retinker the midfield a little bit. Odegaard's been someone who's added to the attack this season. Maybe with Rodri out, he can have a little more free reign in the midfield. Maybe he chips in on offense in the attack if they need him to, because he's done that already this season. But definitely some key absences to keep an eye on for Arsenal. It's not ideal for Arsenal timing wise, and it's never ideal to lose players like that. But this is like such a big match for them after the way the two went down last season, a 3-1 loss and a 4-1 loss, and like it's almost like if they want to be serious title contenders, that they really have to like get a result here. Maybe
Yeah.
especially because it's at home.
I was gonna say that's the real problem. Is like I bet you if you asked, the Arsenal staff or players if they'd prefer to have their City match be in the first half of the season be home or away, I bet you they'd all choose it to be away because that way,
Yeah.
if you get a result, like awesome, found money, great. If you don't, you're playing City at the Etihad. Like, what do you expect? So having this be their lone home match against City in the Premier League's coming up at basically week 8, when they're not exactly in their finest of form. You're right. I think Arsenal would absolutely prefer this to be at least an away match, or if not away match, have the home match be closer to December than
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. Last season we got them both in the second half of the calendar year because of the first one got
Oh
like
yeah,
pushed back for a FA Cup or it was something pushed it back. So we
yeah,
got them both pretty late. So there was even more drama in both those matches because it was so tight, and then City kind of put it to bed. Um, some interesting numbers in the recent head-to-heads. Both teams have scored in 4 out of 5, which plays to what we're saying with the over here. We kind of expect that. City's been first to score in these head-to-heads 8 out of 9 times. I think if that trend continues, it gets very tough for Arsenal to come back from that. And Arsenal hasn't kept a clean sheet against City in 9 straight, which is definitely something interesting there as well.
yeah. I'm telling you that team total over 1.5. It's a really good bet.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to add to this one, Scotty, before we go? I'll throw a couple goal scorer numbers at you because they're not always they're not always favorable with City, but Holland is plus 105. You don't get him at that number
Yeah,
very often. Alvarez plus 260. It really jumps after Holland. Jesus plus 280, Trossard plus 280, and Nketiah plus 280 if he plays. Martinelli and Saka 300. They probably are unavailable, like we said. Odegaard plus 350. I mean, you have to go all the way to plus 400 for Jeremy Doku, and Kai Havertz plus 450, Foden plus 350. I mean, the numbers really jump. Grealish
yeah.
plus 400 as well.
I love. I mean, listen, Holland at plus money is always good, so that's great. But I'm not going to make that my main pick because that's cheating. Love Jesus at plus 280. That's incredible. I think he was Mr. Consistent for Arsenal before his injury. I think he's been kind of coming into form, like we talked about. Scored midweek. Probably not going to get a full 90, but I think he'll be as motivated as anybody on the pitch to score in this one. So I love that. And then depending on if Doku starts, like I would consider tossing him in there, especially at plus 400. You have to
Yeah.
wait around to see. The other thing too is I don't know if you have goal or assist numbers. Usually those come out
Yeah,
later,
those come out
but
later.
if you take a look at that on Saturday or early Sunday, you know both of those two guys I mentioned, Jesus and Doku, absolutely they'll probably still be probably plus 130 to plus 140 range. And those are also good ones because Doku being in on the wing, crossing it into Holland, like that's an easy goal assist opportunity. And Jesus just kind of plays like up sometimes. Like he'll play a little false nine action. He'll distribute inside the box, leave little layoffs like Odegaard. So I can certainly see him picking up assists as well.
Yeah, those are definitely ones to keep an eye on. I'm sure Scotty, if he finds ones he likes when he puts out the Patreon props on our Patreon page, he does the Premier Leagues. Nick and I usually do the Serie A ones. Something will be in there. And I think anytime you can get a player like Jesus at plus 280, you probably take a shot on it. I mean, even Holland at plus 105, if you're someone who likes to bet goal scorer props, you almost have to take it because you never get that value on him. And if he doesn't score this match, you just chalk it up as a loss and you move on because when else are you going to get him as a plus money goal scorer? It's like Harry Kane now in the Bundesliga, right? He's like minus 180 every time. So it's one of those things that I think you have to take a shot at. And then I think you look at the starting lineup, right? And if you see that Alvarez gets a start along with Holland, maybe you take a shot at him at plus 260 because he's a guy who scores a lot of time when he's on the pitch. And, he is a really gifted goal scorer.
Yeah, I feel like he almost has to start with Rodri and KDB out because they've been playing him kind of behind Holland, and I think that would kind of make sense in this one if you want to kind of keep those two guys kind of paired up and then let Grealish or whomever kind of do the dirty work on the wings. That kind of makes sense, but we'll see what Pep does. Pep has also been known to throw a curveball every once in a while in some of these
Yeah.
big matchups. So
Yeah, certainly things to keep an eye on. Definitely keep up with our social media and Patreon page because if there's things we like as we get up to kick that we didn't get to talk on about here, and that's where they're going to be. So definitely keep an eye. There's going to be things that when the starting lineups come out is when you put some of those final bets in, and that's where we'll put them for you. So Scotty, I think it's time to move on to our locks. The week you mentioned you had one in this match. Maybe kick it off with that one.
Yeah, I do. I took Manchester City money line plus 145 as my first lock. You're not going to see Manchester City money line at plus money too often. Usually it'll be in a road game like this one is, and usually it'll be against a top four side like this is. So that means you usually will have three chances to do it on any given season. And I love this one because they're coming off of a loss already. They lost to Wolves this weekend. I don't think they rarely, if ever, lose consecutive games in the Premier League under Pep Guardiola. I tried to research it. I went back to 2018, and that was the first instance that I could find that really stood
Wow.
out to me. So you're talking like 5 years since the last time that under Pep they've lost back-to-back Premier League games. So I love that, they have a good chance to rebound. And then as we talked about, like they've really just dominated Arsenal in this fixture. And sometimes that is a mental block that's tough for teams to overcome. If Arsenal had won, I guess they did win the Community Shield, albeit in penalty kicks. But, if they had won that straight up, then maybe that block is a little bit, defeated. But I don't know. I think City can kind of continue this trend. I think Haaland has been quiet, relatively speaking, for the last 2 weeks. So he's kind of due for a breakout game. And, I think Pep's going to have to get a little bit more attack minded with Rodri being out. So you might see a Doku or a Alvarez starting with Haaland, and maybe we see a high offensive game that goes back and forth, but ultimately City kind of figures out at the end. So I like it. I'm not going to overthink this. It's Manchester City. It's plus money. Just take it.
Yeah, if you're a believer in City, you don't get them at that kind of number very often, like you said. All right, my first one, I'm going to Serie A. This is the Friday noon or 12:30 kickoff here on the East Coast US. If you're going to take this one, you got to get in pretty early in the weekend. It's Empoli against Udinese, draw at plus 230. I almost never bet draws. Like, you could probably count them on less than one hand. The amount of times I've bet a straight up draw. I usually am like more of a draw no bet person. Just protect against the draw and take the club I like better. But neither of these teams scores much, and neither will want to drop all 3 points in what could eventually be a relegation 6-pointer, which is the way I'm looking at this already, because early in the season you can already see it kind of shaping up for those two clubs this way. I'm just going to read out their goal scoring numbers so far, and Empoli has scored literally one goal in in 7 matches. They've scored once, and it was a 1-0 win that got them their only 3 points of the season. Udinese scored 4 times in 7 matches, en route to 4 draws and 3 losses. So neither of these teams has scored much. Now, Empoli has no draws this year, mainly because they don't score goals and they concede. But Udinese has been pretty draw friendly this season. And I think it's going to be one of those conservative matches, maybe a 1-1, even maybe a 0-0. I know they both concede goals, but I think they're both going to play it in a way that they're going to be scared to give up the first one. And it might be one of the most unattractive matches you see all weekend, but I definitely think there's a good chance of a draw here. And I'm going to take a shot on it at plus 230. If you're more of a draw no bet person, you might look at Udinese, but I think the draw is seriously in play here.
The draw line is how I got back into it, right? I think I started off the season 1-6, and then I took, I think it was like an Everton game, draw
I
line.
think so.
And that was like also like plus 230. And I hit that, and all of a sudden my units came back. So I like the pick, coach. My second lock of the weekend, I'm taking Brentford +1. It's minus 135 at Manchester United. Manchester United kind of stink. They do. I don't know what's going on there. Ten Hag looked like he was the guy last season. Now it's kind of, the wheels are starting to fall off a little bit. So it kind of goes two ways here. Brentford at the same time are also kings of the draw. I think they've drawn 4 of their 7 matches so far this season. And then the other ones are a 1-goal loss, a win, and a 2-goal loss. So that means Brentford +1 over the course of the season so far is 5-1-1. Pretty good record. I like that trend to continue here. I don't know that Brentford are going to come out and score, 1 or 2. I don't know if they're going to come out and score 2 or 3 goals, but I think 1 goal is certainly enough to get a result with the way that United have been playing. And we just saw what happened with Galatasaray. They came in, they kind of took over, and I think United will probably still be reeling a little bit for that one this weekend. So I can see Brentford coming in here, just taking a result out of Old Trafford and being happy with a point, if not 3.
Yeah, it's really one of those matches too that you have to see what kind of mentality Manchester United comes out after back-to-back losses at home, and now it could be, suppose they fall behind and they're still down at halftime or the 60th minute. Like, do they have the fight in them, or are mentally they're gonna be like, wow, this will be like our third straight loss at home?
And the real problem right now is Onana has zero confidence. I mean, he's been
Yeah,
horrible. From a Liverpool side, like when Karius lost his confidence and just became a disaster, like it sucked watching that team play because you just knew that there was a liability in the goal and at the back, and anything could happen. And it's kind of what's happening to Onana, right? Like the third, I think it was the third goal they gave up against Galatasaray, the winner. It was a PK that Onana tried to pass up, kicked it right to a Galatasaray player, and Casemiro had to kind of take out the player in the box, picked up a red card, gave up a PK. The PK didn't get converted, but then like 2 seconds later they managed to score. So Onana is certainly a wild card here, where like I could see Brentford getting gifted a goal because of his play.
yeah, he's almost becoming like a walking meme this season for them, right? Like
It's like
it's
taking
been
over from
three or
Maguire.
yeah, it's been like 3 or 4 times highway robbery on Inter's part to get what they got for him, right? And
Yeah.
and there they are humming along with Jan Sommer, who's like 38 years old in goal and still not missing a beat. So, maybe you change your style of play when playing out from the back a little bit, but they're not losing much in terms of shot stopping at this point. So, yeah, that's a big factor when your goalie just can't stop a shot or makes those kind of mistakes to put you in those kind of positions. It's not good. Will be one to keep an eye on, and I think that's a good bet. I think Brentford can keep it close, even though they're not as good as they were last year. I think with United in this mindset, it's going to be tough for them to really like exploit
Yeah.
Brentford and pull away. I think I'm going to stick with another Friday match for my second one. I'm going to the Bundesliga. Fridays are tough sometimes to handicap, but these were two that jumped out at me. Borussia Mönchengladbach against Mainz, over 3 goals at -110. Like I said, another Friday match, squaring off two teams off to poor starts to the season. Mönchengladbach got its first win last time out, and Mainz remains winless with just 1 point through six. However, unlike the match in Italy, these teams usually go over 2.5. Mainz has done so in 5 out of 6, even though they've only scored 4 times in 6 of those matches, so they're giving up plenty of goals. And Mönchengladbach has gone over in 8 of 10 of their matches and averages just over 4. So going back to last season, including the 6 this season, they've gone over in 8 of those 10. So, and this season in the 6, they've averaged over 4 goals a match. So I like the over 3. I didn't want to go to 3.5 just because I feel like it gets tricky sometimes there, but I definitely think the minimum you get is 3 in a push here, and likely a win at 4.
Yeah, Mainz is a tricky one. I feel like they've been a weird team, kind of almost like maybe I'm just doing this because they both have M and Z, but they kind of remind me of Monza in Serie A, where like they have games where like they play way above their like expected level, and then other games where they're just absolute trash.
Yeah. Yeah, last year they hung around mid-table for quite a while, I think, and then they kind of faded. But this year they've just been bad from what I've seen in the score lines.
Yeah. Well, speaking of bad, my final lock of the weekend is going to be Bournemouth double chance -120 at Everton. And that's because Everton definitely stink. Like Everton are really, really bad. This is the third season in a row that they've been at the bottom of the table fighting for their lives, and it's going to continue again. I understand that Bournemouth don't have a win to their name so far this season, so it's kind of odd to make them a lock, but at the same time, neither did Luton Town, and Luton Town got their first win of the season against Everton last weekend. So I think Everton are kind of kings makers in the sense where they allow these lower level teams to come in and take points off them. So I don't even need Bournemouth really to get a win here. A draw will cash this for me as well. But I think Bournemouth are due for a little bit of a breakout. They're not a good team, but they definitely are better than what they are right now. So I think they can absolutely come into Everton with the way that Everton have been playing and get a win, if not, at least a draw.
All right, and I'm going back to a team that won me a bet last week, and it's Stuttgart moneyline -105 against Wolfsburg. Stuttgart has been one of the most pleasant early season surprises in Germany, sitting second in the table with 15 points and one off the lead. Wolfsburg has been solid as well with 12 points. However, Stuttgart has been nearly flawless in their 3 home matches with 13 goals scored and just 1 conceded. Meanwhile, both of Wolfsburg's losses have come on the road where they've scored only 3 times in 3 matches. I like Stuttgart's high-flying attack to prevail at home, stay hot, and cash this one at close to even money.
All right, time to get into Nick's picks. I'll start with the first one, Coach. Nick's taking AC Milan money line minus 115 at Genoa. And his reasoning is kind of the reasoning why I don't like this pick. It's, he says Milan is due, his favorite phrase. They're due after tons of chances every game and competing for first. So I agree, Nick. They do have tons of chances every game, but I'm just nervous about how infrequently they actually convert those. I mean, luckily they converted the 2 goals for me against Lazio last weekend and hit me my team total over, but it took them a while to get there. So at, like you said, the top of the show, at some point that's going to come back to bite them. So I don't necessarily hate the pick for Nick. I'm just saying that logic is, can also be used against them.
Yeah. All right. The second one, he's taking my team Roma moneyline minus 125 at Cagliari. And his
He's doing
rationale
that
for
on
this
purpose.
one, yeah, I think
He's doing this on
just
purpose.
just to screw with
No, yeah,
me.
this one he's doing on purpose because if he loses it, he feels good that Roma has lost.
Roma lost, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm a sucker for a good Roma money line at minus 125 as well. But he says he picks Roma because he's been cold, and if they don't win, I get to make fun of Mourinho. So that's his logic.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
He gets to make fun of Mourinho, gets to make fun of me on the show probably next week when hopefully we'll have all 3 people back. And Roma maybe falls behind Lazio on the table. Maybe, I don't know. But I do like the number. I also will mention, since we're on it, I did like both team totals over 1.5 for both of these teams. If you believe in Milan or Roma to score 2 in one of these matches on the road against, Genoa's been pretty decent. Cagliari hasn't. If you think they get 2 goals, I think they're both around minus 120. Those could be in play too.
All right. We'll go to the next third and final lock of the weekend. It's the other club from Rome. It's Lazio versus Atalanta. The over 2.5. It's minus 105. Nick says the reason why he's taking this is that Atalanta is the OG easy overs club. Need he say more? He doesn't. I will. The other thing is Lazio's defense has been horrible all season long in all competitions, not just Serie A, but it's also been bad in Champions League as well. The offense is okay. It's nothing to write home about, but it's competent. So put those 2 things together, and a club like Atalanta, who are sitting in 5th place, I think, right now, and competing for top 4, certainly a good recipe for goals. 6th place.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, you expect these kind of matches to go over. Lazio's conceded 10 times in 7 matches. Far cry from last season when they were one of the best defenses in the league. Don't know what's going on there. Speaking of defense, these 2 teams tend to play lower scoring matches. We're going with our pod lock. We're not going with the total though. We're going money line. It's Juve money line minus 125 hosting Torino in that Derby della Mole that I mentioned when we went through the fixtures this weekend. Juve's unbeaten in their last 18 against their crosstown rivals and have scored in 20 straight matches against them. I know Juve was a dominant force for a really long time in the league, almost a decade. But it's surprising that they didn't drop at least 1 to Torino, because Torino's been like a mid-table team in that time and even pushed for Europa. I guess Europa League before Conference League came around. But with this one being at the Allianz Stadium, we expect this trend to continue. Torino probably plays them tough, probably keeps it low scoring. I could see a 1-2-0 win from Juve in this one, but Torino's attack doesn't generate all that much. I think that Juve gets it done at minus 125.
Yeah, you got to figure Juve find a way to win here. We were talking about it beforehand. Like the worst case scenario, or I guess the best case scenario here for Torino is maybe a draw. So if Juve can just get a goal, then it's going to force Torino out, and I think that'll spell trouble for them. Side note, was in Turin last weekend. A very lovely city, a very lovely place to go. Great food. My only complaint was that they had a lot of posters of Zaniolo around in the windows for whatever reason, wearing the Italian national team kit. At first I thought it was Vlahovic. I was trying to make the tie-ins with Juve, and then I realized, no, that's not Vlahovic because he doesn't play for the Italian team. Then it hit me who it was. So I don't know. Maybe we can get that figured out. Mayor or whoever the head politician is in Torino, maybe we can get these posters removed and put somebody else up. But
I can't get like a Chiesa up or something.
It was
not
a
even
very
a guy
weird,
with those Juve connections. Yeah.
And just a weird scene for me to see in many windows around. Definitely lots of posters of Zaniolo. So
yeah.
Other than that, great city.
Yeah. So I think that was my recommendation, right? I'm glad it worked out for you guys because it is a nice city. Definitely a lot to see there. Cool place. Not a fan of the club that plays there, but it happens, right? So We'll leave it there. Hopefully, another at least minimum 7-3 week after we had that last weekend. Push for 8-2, 9-1, maybe 10-0. We've had one of those, I think, in our time. So, thanks again for listening. You can check out all of our stuff on social media, on our Twitter page at KicksPicksPod. We're now on YouTube. If you're listening on audio and you haven't seen our YouTube page yet, same name, KicksPicksPod. And we're starting to do a little bit of work for our guest last week, Andy's site, happyhoursports.net. We put up a couple of written pieces on there for the Champions League, and we'll probably have a piece or two a week. Some of the stuff that is free for all, stuff that's not available, not Patreon paywall stuff. So check out their site, happyhoursports.net. They've got other tons of betting content if you're into betting other sports as well, but we'll be providing some of our soccer content for them, our football content. So thanks again for listening. We'll catch you guys next week.